Desire often forms before conscious attraction is acknowledged. Women fantasize about men they can't control in their mind. When she thinks about you, her body betrays her thoughts. But here's what most men miss. She'll never tell you directly. She'll show you through patterns you've been trained to ignore. Understanding female desire isn't about manipulation. It's about awareness. Because most men walk through life blind to the signals that separate polite interest from obsessive attraction. They confuse friendly conversation with genuine desire. They mistake professional courtesy for romantic tension. And they lose women who were already theirs. The truth is uncomfortable. Women experience attraction in layers. Surface attraction is common. Physical chemistry is frequent. But psychological obsession, that's rare. And when it happens, it rewrites her internal narrative about you. She starts creating scenarios in her mind where you exist, where you matter, where you're present even when you're absent. This isn't about ego. It's about recognizing when a woman has elevated you beyond the ordinary men in her orbit. Because when she fantasizes about you, she's not just imagining physical intimacy. She's rehearsing emotional connection, testing compatibility, building a future that doesn't exist yet. And she's doing all of this without your permission. The stakes are simple. If you can't read these signs, you'll misinterpret her behavior. You'll treat genuine desire like casual friendliness. You'll apply logic to emotional complexity, and you'll watch her eventually redirect that energy towards someone who understands the game she's not even aware she's playing. This matters because desire is fleeting. Fantasy is powerful, but it fades without reinforcement. If you don't recognize when you occupy mental real estate in her mind, you can't build on that foundation. You can't escalate. You can't transition from her imagination into her reality. So pay attention, because what I'm about to show you isn't obvious. It's buried in micro behaviors, in linguistic patterns, in emotional contradictions that reveal more than any direct confession ever could. Behavioral psychology has studied attraction for decades, and the data is clear. When someone becomes the subject of romantic or sexual fantasy, their brain activity changes. The prefrontal cortex shows increased activation when processing information about that person. The reward system lights up at unexpected mentions of their name. Memory consolidation strengthens around interactions with them. This isn't metaphor, it's neurochemistry. When she fantasizes about you, her brain is quite literally rewiring itself to prioritize you. Dopamine release patterns shift, attention mechanisms recalibrate, and her behavior, conscious and unconscious, begins to reflect this internal transformation. The challenge is that most of these signals are subtle. Evolution designed women to conceal overt displays of desire in certain contexts. Social survival often depended on discretion, so the signs manifest indirectly through body language, inconsistencies, conversation patterns, proximity management, and emotional regulation failures. She won't announce her thoughts, but she can't completely hide them either. Picture this. The room is dimly lit. You're sitting across from her. Maybe it's a coffee shop. Maybe it's a quiet bar. Maybe it's just a moment stolen between the chaos of ordinary life. She's talking, but there's something underneath the words. A tension you can't quite name. A weight to her attention that feels different from every other conversation you've had with anyone else. You've felt this before, but you've dismissed it. Tonight you won't, because you're about to learn what her unconscious mind is revealing about her internal world. The world where you exist in ways you haven't earned yet. The world where she's already decided things about you that her conscious mind hasn't caught up to. Let's decode the 6 signs slowly, carefully, because missing even one means missing the entire map. Sig 1, she creates reasons to touch you, but only in socially acceptable ways. Physical touch is a negotiation. Most people respect boundaries automatically. They maintain the social distance that context demands. Professional settings require one thing. Casual friendships require another. Romantic interest requires permission that hasn't been granted yet. But when she's fantasizing about you, her body betrays discipline. She'll find excuses. A hand on your arm when she laughs. Fingers brushing yours when she passes you something. Leaning in closer than necessary when you speak. Adjusting your collar or touching your shoulder under the guise of emphasis. These aren't accidents. They're exploratory touches. Her unconscious mind is testing what physical contact with you feels like. She's gathering sensory data to fuel the mental scenario she's building. Because fantasy requires memory, texture, warmth, presence, and she needs to remember what you feel like. Watch how she touches other people. Does she do this with everyone or just you? If it's isolated behavior, if her physical boundaries shift specifically in your presence, you've become an exception. And exceptions reveal preference. They reveal mental preoccupation. The psychology here is straightforward. Touch releases oxytocin. Her brain is chemically bonding her to you, one small contact at a time. She's not doing this consciously. She's following impulses that stem from fantasy bleeding into reality. And the more she touches you, the more she wants to touch you. It's a loop, one you can recognize if you're paying attention. Sign 22. Her laughter around you is different. Louder, longer, more unguarded. Laughter is social currency, but it's also emotional leakage. When a woman laughs at your jokes, the way she laughs at no one else's. When she finds humor in statements that aren't objectively funny, when her laughter lasts longer than the moment warrants, she's not responding to comedy. She's responding to you. Fantasy creates emotional availability. When she's mentally rehearsing scenarios with you, her guard lowers. Her emotional responses become exaggerated because she's already emotionally invested in a version of you that exists in her mind. So she laughs harder. She smiles more openly. She allows herself to be vulnerable in small ways that signal internal permission. Permission she's granted herself to imagine more with you than what's currently happening. This isn't about being funny. It's about being him, the man she's assigned significance to in her private thoughts. Studies on attraction show that women display exaggerated positive affect around men they're romantically interested in. It's an unconscious signaling mechanism, an invitation hidden in emotional generosity. Compare her laughter in your presence to how she laughs with others. Is there a qualitative difference? Does her body language open when she laughs with you? Head tilted back, shoulders relaxed, eye contact sustained? Those are markers, small confirmations that her internal experience around you differs from her baseline social interactions. Sign tree. She remembers details about you. That no one else bothers to memory is selective. We remember what matters. When she recalls things you mentioned in passing, your favorite book, the coffee you prefer, the story you told 3 weeks ago about your childhood, she's not just being polite. She's collecting pieces of you. Fantasy requires detail. Generic attraction is forgettable, but obsessive attraction that demands specificity. She needs to know you, not a placeholder, not an archetype, but the actual complicated human you are. So she listens differently. When you talk, she's not waiting for her turn to speak. She's cataloging information, building a psychological profile, constructing a three-dimensional version of you in her mind that she can interact with when you're not physically present. This is why she brings up things you've forgotten you mentioned. It's why she asks follow-up questions about topics no one else cares about. Her attention is a spotlight, and it's fixed on you. Cognitive psychology explains this through selective encoding. When emotional significance is assigned to a stimulus, in this case you, the brain prioritizes information related to that stimulus. Memory consolidation strengthens. Retrieval becomes easier. She remembers because you matter. And mattering is the foundation of fantasy. Without detail, fantasy collapses into generic daydreaming. But with specificity, it becomes immersive. It becomes something she can return to repeatedly, something that feels real even though it isn't. SISIEZ for she finds excuses to be in your physical space repeatedly. Proximity is intentional. People avoid spaces occupied by individuals they're indifferent to. They optimize their environment for comfort and convenience. But when someone shows up in your space repeatedly, especially when there's no logical reason, they're manufacturing opportunities. She'll suddenly need to grab coffee at the same place you frequent. She'll attend events she's never shown interest in before. She'll linger in conversations that have naturally ended, searching for reasons to extend the interaction. This isn't coincidence. It's orchestration. When she fantasizes about you, being near you becomes a priority. Her unconscious mind is driving her toward physical proximity because presence reinforces fantasy. Every interaction gives her new material, new expressions, new vocal inflections, new memories to incorporate into the mental scenario she's building. Behavioral analysis shows that people subconsciously seek proximity to individuals they're attracted to. They orbit. They create patterns of nearness that feel accidental but are statistically improbable. Track the frequency. How often does she end up in the same space as you? How many times does she adjust her schedule or location to align with yours? If the pattern is consistent, it's not luck. It's intentionality masked as coincidence. And intentionality reveals internal motivation. Motivation driven by thoughts. She's not voicing. Thoughts where you play the central role. Sign 5, her texting behavior is inconsistent, overly engaged, then suddenly distant communication patterns reveal internal conflict. When she's fantasizing about you, her messaging behavior becomes erratic. She'll text you enthusiastically. Long messages, quick responses, sustained conversation, then suddenly she'll pull back. Short replies, delayed responses. Emotional distance. This isn't disinterest, it's self-protection. Fantasy creates vulnerability. The more she invests mentally, the more exposed she feels. So she oscillates. She engages, realizes she's revealing too much, then retreats. She tests your interest, then withdraws before you can reject the version of reality she's created. Psychologically, this mirrors approach. Avoidance conflict. She's drawn to you, but approaching requires risk, so she advances, retreats, advances again. The pattern repeats until either you provide clarity or the tension becomes unsustainable. Watch the rhythm. Does she initiate contact frequently, then disappear? Does she respond immediately sometimes, then take hours or days other times? Inconsistency isn't apathy, it's emotional management. She's trying to balance desire with self-preservation, and that balance is difficult to maintain when you occupy significant mental space. Her texts aren't just messages. The negotiations between who she wants to be with you and who she's afraid to reveal. SI sign 6. She asks questions about your relationship status. Indirectly, direct questions reveal intent, but indirect questions reveal preoccupation. When she's fantasizing about you, she needs to know if you're available, not because she's ready to act, but because fantasy requires believability. If you're unavailable, the scenario she's building collapses under the weight of impossibility. So she probes. She'll ask about your weekend plans, listening for references to a partner. She'll mention relationships in general conversation, gauging your responses. She'll casually inquire about what you look for in someone, mapping herself against your stated preferences. These aren't random topics. They're intelligence gathering. Linguistic analysis shows that people fixated on romantic possibilities with someone will steer conversations toward relationship, adjacent topics repeatedly. They're testing waters without committing to the swim. Notice the frequency. How often does she circle back to your romantic life? How many times does she create openings for you to reveal your availability? If the pattern is persistent, it's because the answer matters. It matters because her internal world has already placed you in scenarios that require your availability to sustain. Without confirmation, those scenarios remain uncertain. And uncertainty is uncomfortable when someone has already invested emotionally in a specific outcome. She's not just curious, she's preparing for a reality where her fantasy could transition into something tangible, something she doesn't have to imagine anymore. Fantasy is powerful, but it's also fragile. These 6 signs reveal a woman whose internal world has made space for you, who has elevated you beyond casual interest into genuine preoccupation, who thinks about you when you're not there, who rehearses conversations before they happen, who imagines futures that don't exist yet. But here's the truth most men need to hear. Recognition isn't enough. If you see these signs and do nothing, the fantasy will eventually fade, because fantasy requires fuel. It needs reinforcement. It needs escalation. Without forward movement, her mind will eventually redirect that energy elsewhere, towards someone who acts towards someone who understands the desire as a window, not a permanent door. So what do? You reciprocate with intention. You match her investment. You create the reality she's been imagining, but carefully, because rushing kills tension, and tension is what makes desire sustainable. You acknowledge the signs without announcing them. You build proximity. You create moments that feel inevitable but not forced. You give her reasons to keep thinking about you while providing evidence that her thoughts aren't one-sided. This isn't manipulation, it's alignment, aligning your actions with the internal experience she's already having. Meeting her where her mind has already placed you and transforming private fantasy into shared reality. Because the most powerful relationships don't start with confessions. They start with recognition, with seeing what's hidden, with understanding that the most meaningful attractions are the ones people carry silently, hoping someone will notice without them having to explain. You've been given the map. The question isn't whether the signs are there. The question is whether you're brave enough to act on